Welcome to Twilight Terror Stories. Twilight is not just the end of day, it's the beginning of something else. A time when the shadows stretch and fear takes its first breath. You've stepped into that moment now, and the stories are waiting. Let them find you. The threshold sighed under my weight as Elias breached the cold stillness of the ancestral home, the evening air sharp against his face. A brief incursion he'd planned, merely to retrieve remnants left dormant by his forebears, Alara and Ronan. Yet, the first footfalls across the entrance hall resonated with an alien quality. Floorboards groaned beneath him, not randomly, but in a cadence that arrested his stride. A miasma of dampness and stale time, the perfume of prolonged vacancy, hung heavy. He attempted to dismiss the burgeoning disquiet, but the profound silence amplified his unease. That night, amidst the dust and shadows, the discovery of the journals commenced the unraveling of his world. He ascended to the attic, seeking faded photographs, ghosts on paper. Instead, his quest unearthed a compact coffer tucked away, shrouded in dust thick as velvet. Its wooden surface was time-worn, the metal hasp fractured. With minimal persuasion, he coaxed it open. Within lay a cache of notebooks, journals worn smooth by handling, their pages brittle and ambered. The ink within them faded like old bruises. A cloud of disturbed dust rose as he blew across the topmost volume, catching in his throat. A moment passed. Then curiosity compelled him to unfurl the first diary. Initially, Elias scanned the script for familial anecdotes or historical markers. What met his eyes instead were chronicles of the peculiar. Muffled utterances drifting through hallways after dark, portals swinging open untouched by human hands, spectral silhouettes flickering across window panes in untenanted rooms. His own name surfaced in several entries. These references, though fleeting, sent a jolt through him. Phrases like, "Elias may perceive it in time," or "He is destined to witness what we all have witnessed," caused his fingers to quiver. He plunged deeper, navigating the layered testimonies within each volume. They originated from disparate kin across generations: grandmother Alara, Uncle Ronan, others whose names were mere whispers in family lore. Yet the narratives converged. Each chronicler detailed steps echoing in emptiness, phantom whispers, and a pervasive, unsettling presence. Doubt invariably marked their initial entries, only to yield to the unshakable conviction that the house harbored something inexplicable. Logic had always been Elias's compass, his life navigated by facts, evidence, the irrefutable cadence of the rational. The predictable rhythm of existence was his sanctuary. Finishing the diaries, he rationalized, "Fear is infectious. Perhaps each successive generation, reading the prior accounts, succumbed to suggestion, perpetuating the myth in their own script." This he told himself, even as the house began to murmur its secrets that very night. Secrets increasingly difficult to ignore. Around the stroke of midnight, the first susurrus reached him, a sibilant breath shaping a single, unintelligible word in the cavernous dark. His heart hammered against his ribs. Rising from the embrace of a threadbare armchair in the parlor, he traversed the protesting floorboards, searching for the source. Emptiness greeted him. The room remained static. He was utterly alone. He retreated, attributing the sound to a capricious draft. Minutes later, a delicate scraping emanated from the hallway. A rodent, perhaps, yet the sound possessed a deliberate quality, ceasing the instant his foot met the hallway's aged timber. Back in the parlor, he ignited several lamps, bathing the room in a fragile glow, forcing his focus onto the rhythm of his own breathing. A constriction seized his chest. His palms grew slick. Nerves, he insisted silently, just the old journals weaving their unsettling spell. He settled at a small escritoire, riffling through more pages, seeking distraction. Then a notation snagged his attention. Mention of a sealed door in the cellar. Years had passed since he'd ventured into that subterranean space, a repository for his grandparents' accumulated detritus. The diary spoke of scratching sounds near that particular door, of a shadow observed gliding beneath its threshold. The writer asserted unequivocally something resided beyond it. Elias resolved to investigate immediately. Armed with a torch wrested from a kitchen drawer, he located the cellar entrance in the rear passage. The hinges shrieked their protest as he pulled it open, releasing a gust of musty air. Steep, narrow steps plunged into darkness. The switch at the landing was defunct. He swept the torch beam downwards, descending cautiously. The air turned frigid, thick with the smell of damp stone. His feet moved with deliberation, wary of the fractured wooden treads. At the bottom, crates and a skeletal workbench materialized from the gloom. The torchlight illuminated silken cobwebs draping the corners, dust motes dancing in its beam, and there, in the far left recess, stood another door. It seemed more ancient than its surroundings, its paint blistered, the wood splintered. His light revealed a heavy metal padlock clamped onto a thick hasp. The diaries had mentioned a locked door. This had to be it. Drawn nearer, he felt a subtle draft whispering around the door's edges. He inclined his head, listening intently. A faint noise resonated from within, a soft shuffling sound. He remained motionless, transfixed by the portal. His throat constricted. A tremor ran through his hands. Adrenaline surged, urging retreat, yet a potent curiosity anchored him. He grasped the padlock, testing its solidity. It held fast. No key presented itself in the cellar's clutter, and no immediate justification arose for forcing entry. The journals never disclosed the door's secret, only that it remained perpetually unopened. After a protracted moment, he withdrew, mopped his brow, and resolved to return upstairs. The remainder of the night bled away as Elias immersed himself in the diaries back in the parlor, hunting for any clue pertaining to the cellar enigma. He read of footsteps migrating from room to room, of lights pulsing erratically, of doors slamming shut in windless conditions. Multiple entries documented chilling cold spots. One passage declared, "The presence intensifies when disregarded." That sentence resonated, suggesting an awareness, a sentience reacting to attention or its absence. The journals offered no neat explanations, only raw, personal testaments, each writer meticulously recording their sensory experiences. As the hours dwindled, his tension coiled tighter. Fatigue weighed heavy on his eyelids, yet sleep remained elusive. Every minor noise, the house settling, the wind sighing outside, the aged refrigerator's drone, felt magnified, amplified by the charged silence. Around 3 in the morning, oblivion claimed him briefly in the armchair. He awoke with a violent start to the groan of a door. His heart leaped, his eyes snapped open. The parlor door, previously shut, now stood ajar. He strained his ears, catching the faint impress of a footstep. Holding his breath, he rose, sweeping the torch beam around. It grazed a flicker of movement in the hallway near the staircase's base. The motion vanished as swiftly as it appeared. He surged towards the spot, finding only undisturbed air. His heart pounded violently enough to induce dizziness. A cold sweat filmed his skin. His body trembled uncontrollably. He tried to call out, but his throat was parched. His mind scrambled for rational footholds. He felt certain he'd glimpsed a form, roughly human-sized, yet its movement defied natural mechanics, suggesting a glide or float. Forcing a slow inhale, he methodically checked the adjacent rooms. Each was vacant. Nothing seemed disturbed, save for a faint blurring of the dust patterns on the floorboards. Footprints, perhaps, but faded, ancient-looking. He couldn't ascertain if they were his own. The following morning was consumed by a hunt for the cellar key. He ransacked kitchen drawers, prized open old tin boxes in the attic's gloom, probed beneath loose floorboards in the bedrooms. He unearthed forgotten photographs, brittle receipts, intimate letters, but no key. A burgeoning compulsion to breach that door intensified, a conviction that answers lay beyond it. Shoving aside stacked boxes in an attic corner, he uncovered a small metal container, locked, but its lid yielded to the persuasion of a screwdriver. Inside, nestled on velvet lining, lay a cluster of keys on a corroded ring. He carried them downstairs, comparing each against the basement padlock. The third key slid home. He didn't immediately turn it. Testing its fit was enough. The click echoed in the subterranean quiet. He stood there, torch in hand, staring at the lock, the thrum of his pulse loud in his ears. His mouth felt arid. Was he prepared? Uncertainty gnawed at him. One part of his mind anticipated an empty storage space, perhaps a forgotten closet. Another part recoiled, dreading a confrontation with something echoing the diary's phantoms and whispers. He committed. Turning the key again, he heard the lock spring open. He removed the padlock, placed a hesitant hand on the latch, then lifted it. The door swung inward with a protracted groan. A damp, cool current brushed his face, raising goose flesh on his arms. He directed the torch beam inside. The space was compact, closet-sized, lined with shelves cluttered with old jars and dusty implements. The floor was bare concrete. Spotting a light switch, he flicked it. A single naked bulb cast a stark illumination. He stepped across the threshold. Initially, nothing seemed amiss. Then his gaze fixed on a faint discoloration marring the back wall, resembling water damage, yet possessing an unsettling configuration. As he approached, the temperature plummeted perceptibly. His breath plumed white before him. A scraping sound startled him from above. He snapped his head upwards. Only ceiling beams met his sight. Abruptly, the door slammed shut behind him. The bulb flickered violently. He lunged for the handle, finding it inexplicably resistant, as if held fast from the other side. Panic flared. His breathing grew ragged. He shouted, his voice swallowed by the confined space. After several desperate attempts, the door yielded suddenly, pitching him back into the main cellar. It remained open, revealing no impediment, no holder. He checked the latch. It wasn't engaged. there was no physical reason for it to have stuck. He scrambled upstairs, his legs trembling with each ascent, the diary's accounts of capricious forces now terrifyingly validated. He seized the journals once more, devouring further entries. One described an oppressive sensation of being watched. Another recounted an overwhelming chill encountered precisely when approaching that same locked door. The chilling realization dawned. He was meticulously retracing the steps chronicled within those time-worn pages. For several days, Elias remained ensconced within the house, driven by a resolve to unearth the truth. Afternoons were spent methodically exploring every room, searching for hidden compartments, loose planks, antiquated vents that might conjure illusions. He traced the contours of upstairs hallway walls, pressed his ear against their cool plaster, tapped for hollow spaces. He found resonance, but no hidden passages. In daylight, the house maintained a facade of normalcy, punctuated only by stray cold drafts and the occasional phantom footfall in distant chambers. Nightfall invariably brought a resurgence of tension. Soft thuds and indistinct murmurs infiltrated the silence. His senses remained perpetually taut, his heart reacting violently to every creak and groan. Perspiration beaded on his skin despite the ambient chill. A knot of anxiety resided permanently in his stomach, sometimes stealing his appetite entirely. He existed in a state of constant anticipation, yearning for a definitive manifestation, irrefutable proof of the entity haunting the premises. He carried a camera, attempted audio recordings, desperate for tangible evidence. His efforts yielded only static and the mundane symphony of an old structure settling. One evening, engrossed in his grandfather Ronan's diary within the parlor, he read of a moment when Ronan, seated in that very chair, felt an undeniable presence manifest behind him, a distinct pressure upon his shoulders, like invisible hands resting there. Elias paused his reading as a phantom caress, lighter than cobweb silk yet colder than frost, grazed the nape of his neck. He leaped up, whirling around, torch beams slicing the air behind him. Nothing. Yet the space where he'd stood felt tangibly colder. The fine hairs on his arms prickled, his skin tingled. He rubbed his arms briskly, seeking warmth that wouldn't come. That night, he awoke twice to the measured tread of footsteps in the hall. Each time he bolted from bed, only to find the corridor empty. On the second occasion, he elected for stealth, peering through a narrow crack in his bedroom door. The footsteps sounded deliberate, heavy, like boots on wood. They drew nearer, paused momentarily outside his door, then proceeded onward. A shadow flowed across the sliver of light beneath the door. It receded, followed by the distinct creak of the staircase, one step descending at a time. He felt paralyzed, unable to breach the threshold of his room. His heart hammered against his ribs, its frantic rhythm echoing in his ears. Morning brought the familiar struggle for rationalization. He conducted another thorough search of the house, seeking any sign of intrusion. Nothing was missing, nothing disturbed. Doors and windows remained securely locked. No footprints marred the ground outside. He began documenting his own experiences in a blank notebook, his script unsteady as he described the fleeting shape glimpsed in the hallway. Each entry felt like an echo of the older diaries, his own name added to the lineage of haunted observers. On his final night within the house's grip, Elias perched on the edge of his bed, gazing into the illuminated hallway through the open doorway. He kept all the lights ablaze, a flimsy shield against the encroaching dark. Around midnight, a shuffling sound emanated from behind the wall beside him. It seemed unnervingly close, like a palm sliding across the plaster. He rose, pressing his ear to the cool wallpaper. A faint, distinct rap sounded, a single tap. He knocked back tentatively. Silence answered. His chest tightened, his hands shook. Swallowing hard, he stepped back. Later, a low whisper seemed to issue from near the window. He moved towards it, torch beam preceding him. He perceived a nebulous shape coalescing near the heavy curtains. It shifted, then dissolved. His heart thundered. A crushing weight settled on his chest, making breath a conscious effort. He forced himself forward, wrenching the curtains aside. Emptiness. No footprints, no trace of any presence. Only his own reflection stared back from the dark glass. Pale, wide-eyed, hair damp with sweat. He knew then his endurance had reached its limit. The following morning, Elias gathered the diaries and prepared his departure. Before crossing the threshold for the last time, he paused, listening. In the clarity of daylight, the house seemed quiescent. The floors remained silent. No whispers stirred the air. The atmosphere felt almost ordinary, but he recognized the deceptive nature of this calm, sensing the familiar tension coiled just beneath the surface, latent within the silence. He locked the door and drove away, his mind a maelstrom of unanswered questions. Those journals were irrefutable proof. Generations of his family, inhabiting these same rooms, had encountered the identical phenomena. The footsteps, the shadows, the disembodied voices. Those volumes now reside with Elias, artifacts of inherited dread, whispering their truths in the quiet hum of his distant apartment. Occasionally, he revisits their brittle pages, and the chill of those hallways returns, the memory of nights stretched taut with fear. Even now, far removed, faint sounds sometimes intrude upon his solitude, particularly in the deep watches of the night. He cannot be certain whether some unseen tendril followed him from that place, or if his own mind remains ensnared in that cycle of terror and morbid fascination. He harbors no plans to return. The diaries suffice, a stark reminder that logic's reach has its limits, and that within those walls, every creak, every rustle, every spectral murmur holds an undeniable reality for the one who hears it. Anticipation thrummed beneath Eliza's ribs as she reached the threshold of the bibliotheca. Its weathered facade, scarred by time, culminated in a stone archway whose edges crumbled like ancient parchment. A place whispered about in obscure travelogues, a hidden landmark reputed to hoard texts unobtainable elsewhere. She had arrived in the full light of afternoon, eager to lose herself in its depths, envisioning dust motes dancing in sunbeams, the comfort and quiet of aged shelves. Genuine fear was an emotion she never thought to associate with such a sanctuary. Yet, fear was precisely what awaited her. An unexpected coolness, a draft bearing the chill of forgotten corners, snaked along the entryway. To her left sat the reception desk, initially unoccupied. "Hello?" Eliza called out, her voice swallowed by the cavernous hall, returning as a hollow echo, A faint rustling preceded the appearance of an elderly man, unfolding himself from behind the imposing desk. Mr. Silas, ancient as the vellum surrounding him, peered through thick spectacles, his shirt a map of wrinkles. His expression held a flicker of annoyance, the look of a man unaccustomed to, and perhaps resentful of, intrusion. When prompted, Eliza explained her desire simply to wander the archives. He offered a curt shrug and directions rasped in a voice dry as desiccated parchment. 3rd floor, deepest recess, the straight passage. With a nod, Eliza ventured further into the building's heart. Soaring ceilings vaulted overhead in the main corridor. Archaic lamps affixed to the walls sputtered fitfully, casting elongated, dancing shadows that writhed like living things upon the tiled floor. Only the tap, tap, tap of her own footsteps punctuated the profound emptiness. A pervasive scent hung in the air, a tapestry woven from the must of decaying paper and the ghost of damp stone. She reached the grand staircase dominating the building's core. Its steps groaned under her weight, a protest against the disturbance. Her fingers traced the banister's smooth, cold surface as she ascended. The 2nd floor revealed rows upon rows of densely packed shelves, their spines hinting at languages that defied her recognition. Amidst this vast reading room stood deserted tables and chairs, islands in a sea of silence, disturbed only by the low hum of unseen electrical currents. It was then she heard it, a susurrus, delicate as moth wings against her ear, seeming to emanate from just behind her. She spun around. Nothing. A faint acceleration of her pulse, quickly dismissed as wind, or perhaps the eccentricities of old wiring. Continuing upwards, Eliza located the 3rd floor corridor Mr. Silas had indicated. It stretched before her, long and dim, the overhead bulbs flickering intermittently as she passed beneath, bathing the passage in a murky, uncertain glow. Shelves marched along both walls, laden with volumes whose dates often stretched back into the 19th century, their covers faded, peeling, whispering of neglect. The air here felt stagnant, heavy with dust that tickled her nostrils. A subtle tremor of unease began, a prickling sensation on her skin. Her palms grew damp. She found herself glancing over her shoulder with increasing frequency. Another whisper brushed past, this time to her left, a single, sharp syllable, swallowed by the silence before she could grasp its meaning. Eliza froze, straining her ears. Seconds dripped by. Only silence answered. Waiting, expecting a recurrence, she heard nothing further and pressed onward, her mind racing for logical explanations, ventilation shafts, drafts from unseen apertures. Yet the corridor felt hermetically sealed, windowless and oppressive. Brief explorations into the aisles between shelves revealed only deeper shadows and more books. Deeper still, she discovered a small reading nook tucked away. A sturdy desk crowned with a green banker's lamp, an old wooden chair, a scattering of texts on local history. Seeking refuge, Eliza sat, placing her bag on the floor and retrieving her notebook. She began listing titles, cross-referencing against the note she'd brought, hoping to unearth specific references. The lamp emitted a soft, insistent buzz, the filament within crackling faintly. Disquiet gnawed at her, yet she forced her focus onto the task, her own breathing sounding unnaturally loud in the profound stillness. Suddenly, a flicker of motion registered at the periphery of her vision. Lifting her head, she peered towards the aisle's end. Something had shifted behind a towering bookshelf, a fleeting distortion, like a shadow detaching itself from the gloom. Eliza rose, compelled towards the spot, and meticulously checked the rows. Emptiness greeted her. A frantic percussion commenced against Eliza's ribs. A feverish heat bloomed across her skin. Wiping perspiration from her brow, she felt her throat constrict. A trick of the light, she told herself, forcing calmness. Returning to the desk, her gaze fell upon the books spread there. Early settlers' accounts, forgotten practices. She opened one bound in dark green, its pages filled with faded illustrations and terse commentary on regional legends. As she turned a brittle page, a distinct shuffle sounded directly behind her, the scrape of a footstep on the floorboards. Her heart leaped. Whirling around, Eliza saw it. At the far end of the corridor stood a figure, immobile as statuary. The poor lighting obscured details, but its silhouette was stark against the gloom. Unnervingly tall, its limbs seeming stretched beyond natural proportion, its head canted at an angle of intense, silent observation. Adrenaline surged through her, tightening her chest, making her arms tingle. She swallowed hard. "Hello?" The word emerged weak, thin. The figure offered no response. Eliza took a hesitant step forward. In that instant, an overhead light flickered violently, a momentary plunge into darkness, and when illumination returned, the space where the figure had stood was utterly void. An icy knot formed deep in her stomach. Her breathing grew shallow, ragged, her ears filled with a buzzing static. Driven by a morbid need, she walked to the spot. The air there felt palpably colder. Rubbing her arms, she realized she was trembling uncontrollably. The sensation of being watched became overwhelming, inescapable. Fragments of local lore surfaced in her memory, tales of entities that mimicked human forms, shapeshifters whispered about in hushed tones, legends she'd always dismissed. Now, confronted by this profound unease, dismissal felt like folly. She retreated to the reading desk, needing a moment to collect herself. She packed her notebook, her instinct screaming for retreat, yet a stubborn curiosity warred against the fear. She craved answers, needed to know if her senses had betrayed her or if something truly anomalous shared this space. Taking a steadying breath, Eliza ventured down another row of shelves, her steps echoing unnervingly. She moved with deliberate slowness, scanning each intersecting aisle. Occasionally, faint clicks seemed to follow her, like claws tapping gently on the tile. Each time she turned, nothing was there. At the corridor's terminus, she found a door with a tarnished brass knob. It yielded with a low, complaining creak, revealing a storage area. Stacks of boxes pressed against the walls beneath a single, grime-coated window set high near the ceiling. The smell was stale, thick with dampness. Stepping inside, hoping for some mundane explanation, she found no sign of human presence. But near a jumble of crates, the concrete floor bore peculiar scarring. Not random scrapes, but clusters of short, parallel gouges, as if something sharp had scrabbled there frantically. A scraping noise from just outside the door sent a jolt through her, the sound of something brushing against the corridor wall. Extinguishing her small flashlight, Eliza pressed her ear to the wood, holding her breath. Her pulse hammered against her temples. No distinct voice, only a faint, indeterminate shuffling. After a tense moment, she eased the door open a fraction. The corridor seemed darker now, the lights dimmer, the passage somehow elongated, the main staircase no longer visible. Stepping cautiously out, glancing left and right, she saw it again. Halfway down the hall to her right, it stood with its head slightly lowered, arms hanging limply. Eliza froze, sweat prickling her spine, her hands shaking violently. The figure's shoulders rose and fell in a semblance of respiration, though its face remained an unreadable void. A profound, visceral fear clenched her gut. Retreating into the storage room felt like walking into a trap. Her only path lay left, back towards the reading nook, towards escape. She began to move, slowly, her gaze locked on the silent shape. It remained stationary. Then, a sound like a faint, dry hiss feathered the air. Real or imagined, she couldn't be sure. Her heart hammered so violently, it felt like static filling her ears. As she neared the bend that would take her out of its line of sight, the figure twitched, a galvanic spasm that bent it impossibly forward. Primal instinct screamed. Eliza turned, propelled by a desperate velocity, her breath tearing in ragged gasps. Her footsteps slapped against the floor. Behind her, a sound like chitinous points skittering across tile. Rounding the corner, she stumbled, catching herself against a shelf. Books cascaded to the floor with a resounding crash that echoed through the stillness. A frantic glance over her shoulder revealed an empty corridor. Leaning against the shelf, arms trembling, she steadied herself. From the direction she had fled, a faint whisper seemed to coil through the air, beckoning, its words unintelligible. Enough. This transcended curiosity. It was survival. Whatever resided here felt alien, dangerous. She had to leave. Making her way towards the grand staircase, she moved with forced calm, listening intently, each creak of the floorboards amplifying her tension. Reaching the landing, she looked down upon the main floor. Relief washed over her as she spotted Mr. Silas at the front desk, hunched over what looked like a ledger. She descended quickly, eagerness overriding caution. Approaching the desk, she saw him meticulously writing with a fountain pen. His eyes flicked up, the familiar annoyance resurfacing. "Is there someone else here?" Eliza asked, her voice strained. "I saw something, upstairs, on the 3rd floor." He regarded her for a long moment, his brow furrowed. Then the same dismissive shrug. "No one else has entered," he stated flatly. "Just the two of us." He attributed any perceived disturbances to the building's antiquity, the groaning symphony of old pipes and settling foundations. Frustration warred with fear. She wanted to drag him upstairs, show him the gouges in the concrete, point to the flickering lights, but the words caught in her throat. Her hands still shook. She was slick with cold sweat. Stepping back from the desk, Eliza scanned the main floor. Everything appeared stubbornly normal. Buzzing lights, rows of empty tables, nothing amiss. A part of her considered returning upstairs, confronting the unknown, but the thought induced a wave of nausea. The memory of that presence, the cold dread it inspired, was too potent. Her gaze fixed on the tall entrance doors. A deep breath, one last check. Regret might follow inaction, but the need for some sliver of understanding gnawed at her. Turning back to the librarian, she inquired about other sections of the library. Mr. Silas mumbled about restricted archives in the basement, off limits technically, but likely unsecured as no one ever ventured there. He gave her a long, unreadable stare before returning to his script. A sense of foreboding tightened its grip, yet the pull towards that final, unexplored space was irresistible. Perhaps an answer lay below. Behind the main desk, a heavy door marked "Staff Only" yielded easily. Concrete steps descended into gloom, illuminated by a single, naked bulb at the bottom. The walls were rough, unfinished stone. Eliza descended cautiously, clutching the cold iron railing. The air grew thick, humid, redolent of disturbed earth and a faint, coppery tang. Somewhere, water dripped rhythmically. At the base, she found a cramped space choked with towering shelves of archived newspapers and bundled documents, stacked haphazardly, boxes piled precariously. Squeezing between two units into a narrow aisle, the low ceiling forced her to duck. A flicker of movement snagged her attention from the aisle's far corner, followed by a soft rustling. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She stood utterly still, scarcely breathing. The rustling intensified, drawing nearer, accompanied by a scraping sound against the concrete floor. Then, projected onto the wall directly before her, a shadow writhed, immense, distorted, its outline shifting impossibly around the head and shoulders, like something struggling to maintain or coalesce its form. Sweat trickled down her temple. Her stomach churned. Her mouth felt like dust. Attempting to back away silently, her foot struck a loose box. It tumbled with a dull, muffled thud. Eliza clenched her teeth, bracing for an attack. Silence stretched for several heartbeats. Then, the shadow slid back, retreating the way it had come. The scraping sound diminished, fading into nothingness. That was the absolute limit. Turning, Eliza fled back up the concrete stairs, her legs shaky, gripping the railing with white-knuckled intensity. Bursting through the door onto the main floor felt like surfacing for air. Relief flooded her at the sight of the familiar, albeit empty, space. Mr. Silas was gone from the desk. No sign, no sound of him anywhere. This new absence amplified her unease, but she didn't pause to investigate. She made directly for the entrance. Outside, the late afternoon sun struck her like a physical blow, revealing the persistent tremor in her hands, the damp sheen on her skin. Her shoulders ached from tension, her jaw sore from clenching. She glanced back at the library's imposing structure, half expecting to see that elongated silhouette framed in a dusty window pane. But the building remained impassive, calm, guarding its secrets behind worn stone. Calmness eluded Eliza. Her hands refused to steady. The memory of whispers echoed internally. She walked away briskly, putting distance between herself and that place. On the relative normalcy of the sidewalk, amongst oblivious passers-by, she drew several deep, shuddering breaths. Her heart rate began a slow descent from its frantic peak, but her nerves remained frayed wires. Whispers, the impossible figure, scratches on concrete, flickering lights, the monstrous shadow. Nothing coalesced into sense. Her mind cycled through explanations, each less plausible than the last. Exhaustion and a profound sense of violation washed over her. Standing there, she briefly considered returning, finding Mr. Silas demanding, "What?" She couldn't face the possibility of another encounter. Even standing near the entrance felt precarious. Her watch confirmed the day was waning. Closing time approached. Relief mingled with the fear. The thought of being trapped inside after dark was unbearable. Perhaps someday she would return, armed with more than just curiosity, but for now, The entity within those walls felt ancient, potent, and far beyond her capacity to confront. Turning resolutely, Eliza walked down the street. With each step, the tight knot in her shoulders loosened fractionally. The air felt easier to breathe the further she got. Yet, compulsively, she kept glancing back, searching the receding cityscape for a tall, distorted shape trailing her through the twilight. She never saw one. But the memory remained, a barb lodged deep, the chilling certainty that something not entirely of this world lingered within that library, waiting. Real or imagined, the experience was indelible, a stark warning that would keep her far away for a long time to come. The city exhaled its last commuters into the sepulchral hush of the final train, a rattling metal chrysalis slicing through the late-night quiet. I, Alara, was cocooned within, bone-weary from a day stretched too thin. Home, a shower's steam, the oblivion of sleep. That was the trinity I craved. Sinking onto a worn seat midway down the car, the carriage felt cavernous, populated only by scattered islands of humanity adrift in their own thoughts. I let my head fall back, eyelids drooping against the insistent, stuttering pulse of the overhead fluorescence. A blink, a slow refocus, and my gaze snagged on him. Diagonally opposite, separated by a few vacant seats, a figure sat utterly immobile. His attention wasn't wandering, it was a laser, fixed directly upon me with an unnerving, deliberate intensity. No phone consulted, no restless shifting, just pure, unwavering observation. A prickle ran down my spine. I wrenched my eyes away, rationalizing. Late night, strange folks, maybe he was lost in thought, his gaze merely unfocused in my direction. Yet each stolen glance confirmed it. His eyes remained locked on mine, unwavering as stone. The city's underbelly coughed up oddities after dark, I reminded myself, trying to quell the rising disquiet. I adjusted my posture, turning slightly, presenting my shoulder as a shield, a silent plea for disengagement. It offered no deterrence. In the dark mirror of the window opposite, his reflection ghosted beside the tunnel lights, eyes still burning holes in my periphery. His face held a peculiar tension, lips upturned just so at the corners, hovering in a space between detached curiosity and faint amusement. It was the look of someone deriving quiet satisfaction from another's discomfort. My discomfort. The train shuddered onward, its rhythm a jarring counterpoint to the stillness of my watcher. My focus dropped to the scuffed linoleum, tracing patterns, anything to avoid that stare. Yet the feeling persisted, insidious, that the space between us was shrinking, that unseen forces drew him nearer with every clatter of the wheels, though logic insisted he hadn't moved. I began a frantic mental inventory of the upcoming stations, calculating the minutes until my escape. Then, the error. I looked up. He had shifted, one seat closer. His posture, subtly angled towards me now, screamed intent. Those eyes, unwavering, that ghost of a smile, now seeming less amused, more predatory. A cold fist clenched around my heart. Adrenaline surged, a primal scream in my veins. Move, run, escape. But where? The car stretched emptily around us, the few other passengers distant constellations oblivious. The next stop, then, not mine, but Sanctuary beckoned. I'd wait on the platform, catch the next train, walk, anything. As the brakes hissed and the train decelerated, I rose. Simultaneously, he stood. Panic, sharp and electric, jolted through me. My thoughts scattered like startled birds. Don't show fear. Don't react. Don't give him the satisfaction. I stared resolutely ahead, aiming for nonchalance I didn't feel, praying he'd deem me unworthy of pursuit. The doors sighed open. I stepped onto the platform with forced calm, turning immediately towards the exit stairs. Behind me, footsteps echoed, measured, deliberate, chillingly close. A furtive glance over my shoulder confirmed it. There he was, mere paces behind, the disquieting half-smile etched onto his face. Fear became a tangible thing, making my palms slick, my breath catch. The urge to bolt was overwhelming, yet the fear of creating a spectacle, of drawing unwanted attention, held me captive. I walked faster, lengthening my stride, hoping distance might break the spell. Each backward peak revealed him, matching my pace, his gaze never breaking from mine. Desperate, I veered towards a different subway entrance nearby, plunging down the steps, hoping the transient flow of people might swallow me up. But his footsteps descended behind me, amplified by the tiled confines of the stairwell. I tried to weave through the sparse collection of late-night travelers milling below, attempting to dissolve into anonymity. It was futile. He tracked me with uncanny precision, a heat-seeking presence zeroing in. Wherever I moved, his gaze found me. Panic clawed at my throat. Was this some twisted game? Would boredom eventually claim him? A deeper instinct screamed otherwise. His movements, his relentless observation, they felt purposeful, chillingly so. Spotting an empty seat near the front of the next arriving train, I slid into it, shrinking down, hoping the closing doors would be a final barrier. As the train lurched forward, relief warred with dread. Then I saw him, several rows back, settled, watching, still with that unnerving curve to his lips. Subtlety evaporated. I stood abruptly, walked the length of the car, and planted myself by the doors at the opposite end, the maximum possible distance between us. My eyes glued themselves to the door's window, refusing to acknowledge him, refusing to validate his power over my fear. Yet, I felt his stare, a palpable weight pressing against the back of my skull. The train slowed again. My mind raced, options blurring. Staying aboard felt like consenting to be preyed upon, followed perhaps all the way home. A decision crystallized. The instant the doors parted, I launched myself out, sprinting for the nearest street exit without a backward glance. Footsteps pounded close behind, faster now, gaining. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat accompanying my flight up the stairs. Fear and adrenaline fused, obliterating any concern for appearances. Escape was the only imperative. Bursting onto the street, I gasped the cool, damp night air, eyes darting, seeking refuge. Across the road, the bright, artificial promise of a 24-hour convenience store beckoned. I ran, a desperate dash across the asphalt. Just before plunging through the glass door, I risked a look back. He stood on the opposite curb, watching me arrive. He didn't follow this time. He simply stood, bathed in the sodium glow of the streetlights, that twisted smile fixed, his eyes pinning me even through the glass. His stillness was almost worse than the pursuit. Inside, the clerk, Samir, glanced up, his expression registering the wildness in my eyes, but he said nothing. I feigned interest in the brightly lit aisles, grabbing random items, my movements jerky, my senses hyper-alert to the figure outside. He remained rooted to the spot, a sentinel of menace. Minutes crawled by, each one stretching into an eternity. He just stood there, watching, waiting. My pulse throbbed in my ears. My hands trembled as I pretended to compare brands of chips. Each time I looked up, his silhouette remained, that awful smile a fixed point in the night. My phone yielded no comfort. My friend didn't answer. Trapped, cornered. Finally, summoning a shred of courage, I approached the counter. In a low, trembling voice, I explained about the man outside, the following, the staring. Samir listened, his brow furrowed with concern, then nodded gravely. He offered sanctuary, a place to wait until the watcher departed, offered to call someone if needed. A small measure of relief washed over me, the simple solidarity of a stranger, a temporary balm. Together, we waited under the harsh fluorescent glare, two figures observing the third outside. He lingered for several more minutes, an unwavering statue of silent threat. Then, as abruptly as he'd appeared, he turned and melted back into the darkness from which he came. I remained inside for a long while after, peering through the glass, heart still thudding, needing absolute certainty he was gone. Stepping back out onto the sidewalk felt like emerging from a bad dream, though the tremors lingered in my hands. I felt profoundly lucky, as if I'd narrowly sidestepped some unseen, malevolent fate. Weeks have bled into months, yet the memory remains sharp, visceral. Every late train ride is now fraught with a low hum of anxiety. Every lingering glance from a stranger sends a familiar chill down my spine. Who he was, or why I became his focus that night, remains an unsettling mystery. But the phantom pressure of his gaze, the memory of that twisted smile, those things follow me still, long after his physical presence vanished into the city's indifferent night. The steering wheel wrenched itself from my grasp as the sedan plunged into another waterlogged abyss, flinging a curtain of ochre mud across the windscreen. A curse escaped my lips, low and guttural, as I peered through the rain-lashed glass at the treacherous ribbon of track masquerading as a road. This supposed shortcut, a desperate gamble against the clock, was proven disastrous. Twilight bled into the bruised sky, and regret, cold and sharp, pricked at me for abandoning the known highway. Hours I'd driven, a frantic pilgrimage towards my sister's prenuptial dinner. The tempest had conspired against my schedule, slowing progress to a crawl until, in a fit of impatience, I'd surrendered to the digital siren call of my GPS, veering onto this forsaken path. Now, the car groaned beneath me, shuddering through sludge that threatened to swallow it whole, a testament to my folly. Another violent lurch, a sickening crack from below, and the engine coughed, wheezed, and fell silent. Utter stillness descended, broken only by the relentless drumming of rain on the metal roof, stranding me in a sodden purgatory. "No, please, no," I whispered, twisting the key futilely. A pathetic whine answered, then nothing. I sagged against the headrest, the gravity of my predicament settling like silt. Lost, storm-bound, adrift from any signal that might connect me to the world. the rehearsal dinner evaporated from possibility. Scanning the desolate surroundings, a flicker pierced the gloom. Twin beams slicing through the downpour, approaching from astern. Relief, potent and sudden, surged through me. Perhaps salvation wore the guise of a stranger, someone to pull me from this mire or guide me towards a working telephone line. An ancient pickup truck, paint weathered to a dull patina, materialized beside my window. The glass descended with a reluctant squeal, revealing a man whose face, etched by perhaps 50 years of wind and worry, held a look of solicitous concern. "Bit of bother, are we?" His voice, roughened by the elements, carried over the storm's percussion. I managed a nod, hope rekindling. "Yes, I hit something fierce back there. Engine just gave up." His gaze traveled from my stricken vehicle to the swampy track ahead, then back to me. "Aye, this stretch'll bite you if you're not acquainted. Tell you what," he offered. "Let me tow you up to my place? Not far. Got a phone, dry roof. You can wait out the worst of it there." Every cautionary tale I'd ever absorbed screamed warnings in my mind. Yet, as lightning split the heavens with a deafening crack, the alternative, a night entombed in my cold car, seemed infinitely worse. I was already drenched from a brief, useless inspection under the bonnet. "That would be incredibly kind. Thank you," I replied, injecting a confidence I didn't feel into my voice. He introduced himself as Silas, while efficiently securing a tow rope between his truck and my car. His manner was affable, almost excessively so, a trait I mentally filed under rural charm. As we crawled onward, Silas maintained a monologue, probing gently about my origins, my destination. "Wedding, you say?" he mused, hearing about my sister. "That's grand, that is. Family's the bedrock, isn't it? Nothing matters more." A peculiar intensity colored his words, a faint dissonance that pricked my unease, though I tried to dismiss it. The journey stretched far beyond the "not far" Silas had promised. Rain softened to a drizzle, but the darkness was absolute, swallowing landmarks, erasing any sense of direction. At last, we navigated a constricted lane, halting before a large farmhouse. It stood hunched against the night, paint flaking like sunburnt skin, porch listing precariously. Yet warmth spilled from its windows, a fragile beacon in the oppressive black. "Home," Silas declared, cutting the engine's growl. "Let's get you inside, out of the damp." As we neared, the front door creaked open. A woman stood framed in the doorway, her silhouette gaunt against the interior light. An indefinable stiffness in her posture, a coiled tension, sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. "Agnes, look what the storm blew in," Silas announced. "Poor soul's stranded." Agnes's eyes, sharp, assessing, flickered from Silas to me and back. A single, curt nod served as greeting as she stepped aside. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of dust and something else, something vaguely floral but faded. The space was cluttered yet meticulously ordered, a strange marriage of modern conveniences and time-worn antiques. The walls were a gallery of sepia-toned photographs, faces from bygone eras staring out with unnerving solemnity. "You must be chilled to the bone," Agnes observed, her voice unexpectedly quiet, almost brittle. "Come upstairs. I'll find you something dry to wear." Before I could articulate a polite refusal, she was guiding me up a steep, narrow staircase into deeper shadow, illuminated only by a single naked bulb dangling at the corridor's end. Indicating a small bedroom, she pressed a bundle of folded clothes into my hands and retreated downstairs without another word. Changing into the garments, clean but imbued with the faint, musty perfume of long storage, I couldn't dispel a growing sense of wrongness. The room felt preserved, less a guest space than a curated exhibit, and those faint vertical scores marring the wood on the inside of the door, were they merely damage or deliberate marks? Scratch marks? Clutching my sodden clothes, I descended. Silas and Agnes were in the kitchen, heads inclined in low, urgent whispers that ceased the instant I appeared. They turned simultaneously, their smiles pasted on, failing to ignite any warmth in their eyes. "Better now?" Silas inquired, gesturing towards the kitchen table. "Agnes is heating some soup. Must be famished after your troubles." Famished was the last thing I felt. A knot of anxiety tightened in my gut. Primal instinct shrieked for escape. Still, I forced a smile, murmured thanks, unwilling to appear discourteous. "So," I began, striving for a casual tone, "about that telephone?" Silas and Agnes exchanged a glance, swift and indecipherable. "Ah, wouldn't you know?" Silas lamented, shaking his head with theatrical regret. "Storm's likely taken the lines down. Does that often, out this way?" My stomach plummeted. No phone, no lifeline. I was utterly reliant on these unsettling strangers. As Agnes placed a bowl of steaming soup before me, I noticed her hands, crisscrossed with tiny pale scars, as if perpetually fending off tiny claws. "It's a remarkable house," I offered, desperate to break the heavy silence. "Have you been here long?" "Oh, generations," Silas replied, his gaze drifting, becoming distant. "Blood and bone of this place we are. Seen a lot, these walls." "Hold a lot, too," Agnes added, her voice a near whisper, freighted with implication. "Secrets." Soup caught in my throat. "Secrets?" Silas emitted a sound that might have been a chuckle, devoid of mirth. "Every old place has its ghosts, eh, Agnes? Things tucked away." Agnes nodded slowly, that unnerving half-smile flickering. "Indeed. And sometimes what's tucked away decides to come out." The ensuing conversation remains etched in my memory as profoundly disturbing. They spoke of the house's lineage, of long-dead relatives mentioned with a chilling familiarity, as if they lingered just beyond the veil. Events decades past were recounted with the immediacy of yesterday. As the hours crawled by, my apprehension solidified into palpable dread. I pleaded fatigue, hoping for respite, but Silas insisted I remain, regaling me with further chronicles of the house and its spectral inhabitants. It was deep into the night when I heard it, a distinct, heavy thump from the floor above, followed by the undeniable scuffle of footsteps. I froze, eyes darting towards my hosts. They remained impassive, their dialogue uninterrupted. "Did you hear that?" My voice trembled. Silas tilted his head, affecting puzzlement. "Hear what, dear?" "That sound, upstairs. It sounded like..." "Just the old house groaning," Agnes cut in smoothly, dismissively. "Settling its bones, you know." But I knew. It wasn't the house settling. Throughout the remainder of the night, the sounds persisted. Stealthy creaks, dull impacts, and once, a noise horribly suggestive of a stifled cry. When Silas finally led me to a guest room, small, airless, a narrow bed crammed against one wall, I was frayed to the point of breaking. As he wished me good night, I heard the distinct click of a lock turning on the outside of the door. Sleep was an impossibility. I lay rigid in the oppressive darkness, each creak and sigh of the ancient structure amplifying my terror. The faces in the photographs lining this room's walls seemed to possess a malevolent sentience, their painted eyes tracking my slightest movement. With the first gray hint of dawn filtering through the grimy window pane, resolve hardened within me. Car or no car, I had to flee this place. Slipping from the bed, I gathered my damp clothes and cautiously tried the door. It swung inward, unlocked. Silence reigned as I crept down the stairs, heart pounding against my ribs. I'd almost reached the front door when a floorboard groaned betrayingly behind me. I spun, gasping. Silas stood there, observing me with an expression of profound sadness. "Leaving already?" he asked softly. "But you haven't been properly introduced to the rest of the family." As if summoned by his words, figures began to coalesce from the gloom-laden corners of the hall. Men and women clad in attire from another century, their faces spectral white, their forms indistinct yet chillingly familiar. With a sickening lurch of recognition, I saw them, the solemn faces from the photographs, now given three-dimensional, ethereal life. Panic erupted. I bolted through the door, down the sagging porch steps, onto the muddy track, running blindly, propelled by sheer terror. I didn't look back. I ran until my lungs burned like acid and my legs threatened to buckle. Only when I dared to pause, gasping for breath, did I realize the farmhouse was gone, vanished as if it had never been. Hours later, stumbling along a paved highway, a trucker offered me passage to the nearest town. The local constabulary heard my frantic story with polite skepticism. No records existed of a Silas or Agnes farming in that area. No farmhouse matched the description I provided. Sometimes, in the dead quiet of the night, I still hear the echo of those footsteps overhead. I see those pallid figures emerging from the shadows of my memory, and I am haunted by the image of that house, adrift in the darkness, patiently awaiting its next lost traveler. The forest's profound quietude split like fractured glass at the first gunshot's report, launching an explosion of panicked wings skyward. I became stone, the frantic drumbeat in my ribs echoing the vanished birds. This pilgrimage into nature was meant for solace, a rinsing of the mind amid arboreal grandeur. Abruptly, it twisted into something perilous. I'd embarked near dawn, navigating toward a secluded pathhead gleaned from the digital ether. It whispered promises of breathtaking vistas and demanding ascents, an ideal canvas for a day's solitary communion. Hours melted away under the crisp caress of autumn air, the rhythmic percussion of fallen leaves my only companion, swallowed by a solitude the city jealously guarded. Now, rooted, straining against the sudden silence that followed the blast, the starkness of my isolation pressed in. Miles from any known threshold, the digital umbilical cord severed by absent signal, I shared this wilderness with unseen artillery. A fleeting attempt at reason surfaced, perhaps a hunter, lawfully pursuing game. Yet the season felt wrong, and a primal tremor deep within insisted otherwise. That detonation felt too intimate, too pointed. Another crack ripped through the timber, nearer now, a visceral tear in the air. Shouts pursued it, the syllables lost in the distance but the fury unmistakable. Pure instinct propelled me earthward, seeking refuge behind the gnarled circumference of an ancient oak, shrinking myself against its bark. Through narrowed eyes I scanned the surrounding woods. The dense tapestry of undergrowth, moments ago a study in wild beauty, now felt suffocating, each shadow a potential concealment for menace. I fought to quiet the rasp of my own breath, aware that the slightest sound could betray me. Then they materialized. Two figures clad in mottled camouflage bursting through the bracken perhaps 50 yards distant. Rifles held ready, they moved with a predatory focus, their gazes raking the forest floor. Trespassers, despoilers, the realization struck like a physical blow. Their agitated haste confirmed they hunted not beast, but man. I flattened myself further against the oak, pouring all my will into becoming unseen, unheard. The men drew closer, their voices sharpening into discernible words. "Couldn't have gone far," one rasped a gravelly sound. "Not bleeding like that." "Can't let him slip," the other countered, his voice taut as a wire. "He talks, we're finished." My thoughts tangled, then clarified with chilling certainty. Their quarry wasn't four-legged, it was human. Someone who had witnessed their transgression. Someone now wounded, fleeing for survival. And I stood squarely in the cross-current. Prudence screamed to remain hidden, to wait until they passed and then retreat, swift and silent, toward the distant promise of my vehicle. But an insistent whisper from a deeper place refused silence. Someone out there was desperate, and I might be their solitary hope. Drawing a breath that felt thin and inadequate, I committed to a path that veered sharply from safety. The moment their receding forms vanished into the foliage, I moved, angling away from their trajectory, hunting now for traces of their injured prey. An unnerving hush descended upon the woods, as if the very trees held their breath. I ghosted between trunks, senses straining, eyes sweeping for anomalies. A snapped twig, a disturbed patch of loam, any subtle signature of hurried passage. Minutes stretched into an eternity before I saw it. A crimson stain marring the bark of a birch, chest high. Blood. Nausea clenched my stomach, but I pushed onward, deciphering the sporadic trail that led deeper into the sylvan labyrinth. The murmur of moving water grew, guiding me to the lip of a narrow stream. There he was, a man, perhaps 40 years weathered, crumpled against a moss-slicked boulder. His shirt was a dark, sodden map of pain, his face chalky and etched with agony. His eyes flared with terror upon seeing me, one hand scrabbling weakly at his side. Palms raised, empty, I approached. "I want to help," I whispered, the sound loud in the tense air. "Those men, chasing you?" A faint nod, the hand easing its desperate search. "Warden," he forced out between ragged gasps. "Silas. Caught them. Poaching syndicate. Big. Dangerous." Kneeling, I took in the wound. A bullet had torn through his shoulder. The bleeding was profuse, but perhaps not immediately fatal. Yet blood loss in this isolation was a creeping death sentence. "We have to move," I stated, already shucking my pack. "Can you walk?" He nodded again, teeth clenched against a fresh wave of pain as I eased him upright. Using supplies from my modest first aid kit, I bound the wound as tightly as I dared, then offered my shoulder for support. Our progress was tortuously slow. Every twig snap underfoot, every rustle of unseen life resonated like another gunshot. My plan was rudimentary. Gain distance, seek higher ground, pray for a sliver of signal. Perhaps 20 minutes had crawled by when the wind carried it. Voices closer than before. They were on our scent. "There," Silas breathed, gesturing toward a steep incline. "Cave network. Can lose them." It was a gamble. Becoming lost underground was a new peril. But with pursuit closing, choice had evaporated. We began the ascent, each step an ordeal for the wounded warden. As we reached the shadowed maw of the cave, a sharp cry echoed from below. Seen. Without a second thought, we plunged into the subterranean darkness. The ensuing hours became a maelstrom of unseen passages, stumbling navigation and heart-stopping pauses, listening for the echo of our hunters. Silas, whose name I now knew, offered fragmented guidance, but his strength visibly waned. Finally, a narrow fissure opened into a larger chamber. Faint, ethereal light filtered from an unseen source above, illuminating a space roughly the size of a modest room. Silas collapsed against the cool stone, his breathing a harsh sob. "This is it," I murmured, hating the finality but recognizing its truth. "We make our stand here." Silas nodded, his expression grim. "Backup piece. In my boot," he rasped. "Can you shoot?" I shook my head, the memory of a distant carnival shooting gallery mocking me. Silas let out a weary sigh, then talked me through the weapon's brutal mechanics. The pistol felt alien and dreadful in my grasp, a heavy weight of consequence. We didn't wait long. Footfalls resonated from the tunnel, amplifying as they approached. I secreted myself behind a large outcrop of rock, the frantic hammering in my chest a betraying rhythm. The first man entered the cavern, rifle sweeping, movements cautious. I held my breath, finger trembling near the trigger, praying for an alternative. Suddenly, a cascade of loose scree tumbled from above, startling the intruder. In that instant of distraction, Silas erupted from his concealment, launching himself at the man. The rifle discharged, its report concussive in the enclosed space. For a terrifying heartbeat, uncertainty reigned. Then the second poacher burst in, weapon already leveled at Silas. Time warped, stretching thin. I saw the man's finger begin its fatal pressure. Acting on sheer reflex, I stepped clear of the rock and fired. The recoil jolted my arm, the shot singing wildly past its mark. But it was enough. The second man spun towards the new threat, giving Silas the crucial moment needed to wrestle him down. In the ensuing scramble, fueled by adrenaline and desperation, I fumbled rope from my pack. We bound the two men, overpowered more by the shock of our resistance than by any real combat prowess. As the chemical tide receded, the chilling reality crashed down. I sagged against the cave wall, tremors racking my body. Silas sat heavily beside me, his face drawn, but his eyes lucid. "You did well, Alara," he said, his voice low. "Not many would stick their neck out for a stranger." A shaky smile touched my lips. Guess I absorbed too many hero stories growing up. A faint, alien sound penetrated the cave's stillness, the rhythmic thrum of rotor blades. Silas's face split into a grin of profound relief. "Back up," he confirmed. "Missed my check-in. They came looking." The sound intensified, and abruptly, sunlight lanced down into the cavern. A fissure high in the ceiling, unnoticed until now, offered a window to the sky. Within minutes, ropes snaked down, figures rappelling into our makeshift fortress. Our passage through peril had reached its end. In the days that followed, amidst recounting the events to officials, the full magnitude of our encounter emerged. The men were linchpins in a sprawling illegal enterprise, preying on endangered wildlife across the region for years. Our desperate flight and stand had inadvertently triggered the dismantling of a significant criminal network. Silas recovered, ensuring my part wasn't overlooked. Yet, the truest reward resided internally, the quiet knowledge that, faced with extremity, I chose intervention over retreat. Now, when I venture into the woods, my pack is heavier, with a more robust medical kit, a satellite communicator, and the weight of experience. The forest remains my refuge, but I walk its paths with widened awareness, ever conscious that transformation and the chance to matter might lie just beyond the next shadowed bend. The precise instant escapes memory, yet the image remains indelible. Surveying the fresh alabaster emulsion on my bedroom partition, I first beheld the intrusion. Standing framed in the doorway, I absorbed the vista of my handiwork. A pale hue, chosen for its promise of light, its capacity to amplify the morning sun. My brushwork had been deliberate, rhythmic, leaving a surface I hoped was flawless. Overnight, I'd permitted it the stillness required for curing. Then came the dawn inspection. I entered, halted. Microscopic flecks of crimson marred the smooth expanse near the room's far corner. No larger than needle points, they clustered in erratic constellations. Drawing nearer, my breath held, I scrutinized them. They possessed no discernible texture, seemed utterly flat, less on the paint than of it. A tentative fingertip brushed one, no smear, no dampness. Confusion surfaced, but not yet alarm. A flaw in the pigment, perhaps? An idiosyncrasy of the primer beneath? A task for the evening, I resolved. A shrug, a turn, and the demands of the day pulled me away. Returning that night, equipped with a fine brush and the residual paint, I anticipated faint blemishes. Instead, proliferation. The pinpricks had multiplied, extending now into delicate, thread-like lines that spiderwebbed a few inches across the plaster in seemingly arbitrary vectors. Disquiet stirred. My immediate thought, contamination. I carried the paint can outside, placing it beneath the stark glare of the porch lamp. Stirring the contents revealed nothing amiss. No rogue streaks of red swirled within the pale liquid. A tremor of unease vibrated through me, swiftly rationalized away as some peculiar alchemy between the new coating and the old wall. Back inside, the door clicked shut. I switched on a low lamp, aiming for precision, not wanting the overhead glare to strain my vision. Methodically, I applied a fresh layer over the affected quadrant, stroking generously, ensuring complete coverage around the crimson intrusions. Then, retreating to the living area, I sought distraction in the flickering television screen, though my thoughts kept circling back, snagging on the possibility of a primer misstep. A couple of hours drifted past. Returning to the bedroom, I tested the surface with my palm. Dry. I engaged the overhead light. Relief washed over me, the marks had vanished. Cleanup followed, then the surrender to bed. Around 2, thirst propelled me from sleep. Padding towards the kitchen, I passed the bedroom door and registered, through the sliver of space beneath it, an anomalous, faint radiance. A push, the door swung inward. A bizarre scarlet shimmer pulsed weakly along the very section I had retouched. It was a dull throb of light, insufficient to illuminate the room fully, yet stark against the encompassing dark. I ventured a step inside. The lines they had resurrected. Thin, intricate, branching, and chaotic dendrites, they seemed to writhe subtly with the play of ambient shadows. I stood, transfixed for several heartbeats before my hand found the wall switch. Light flooded the space. The glow instantly extinguished, yet the crimson lines persisted, now appearing startlingly vivid, as if they'd shouldered their way through the secondary layer of paint. A cold clench seized my stomach. My heart hammered against my ribs. A frantic scan of the room yielded no explanation. No leaks, no fissures, nothing. My hand reached out again, touched the wall. Cool, utterly dry. The lines refused to flake or bleed. They simply were. Sleep became an elusive quarry that night. I remained exiled in the living room, navigating meaningless channels, attempting to anchor my thoughts. Morning found me contacting the hardware supplier. Had they encountered reports of spontaneous crimson stains post-painting? The voice on the line offered bewildered negatives. Mold, perhaps? Rust bleeding from antiquated pipes? When I hesitantly mentioned the luminescence, a pause, then a soft, disbelieving chuckle. Such a thing, they assured me, was unheard of. I disconnected, feeling a flush of embarrassment mingled with rising frustration. A radical solution formed: repaint everything. Back to the store I drove, procuring a different brand of primer, a different paint. Saturday became a campaign of preparation, gentle sanding, meticulous wiping with damp cloths until the walls were pristine, careful application of the new primer. During its drying interlude, I paused, consumed a Spartan meal, drank water, my gaze repeatedly drawn to the walls, anticipating something. For a time, nothing. The primer held, immaculate. The sharp tang of it filled the house. As evening deepened, I began rolling on the new top coat, a more costly formulation, hoping its quality might somehow seal away whatever malignant element was surfacing. I labored late into the night. By the time I finished, the bedroom gleamed, uniform and serene. A flicker of accomplishment warmed me. I cracked the window, inviting the night air to disperse the fumes, and retreated, leaving the room to its nocturnal cure. Midnight found me restless on the sofa. The bedroom remained forbidden territory. Silence reigned, thick with the lingering scent of fresh paint. My eyelids grew heavy, though a current of tension kept my body taut. Eventually, oblivion claimed me. Hours later, a dream. The walls, animate, pressing inward, their surfaces closing around my shoulders. The acrid smell of paint filled my lungs, a crushing weight on my chest, suffocation imminent. I woke with a gasp, slick with sweat, hands icy. Staring at the ceiling for a disoriented moment, I forced myself upright. A stealthy creep down the hallway, an ear pressed to the bedroom door. Silence. Turning the knob, inhaling sharply, I stepped across the threshold. Initially, only profound darkness greeted me. Then, my eyes adjusted, discerning them. The lines had returned, colonizing a greater territory than before. They sprawled across the plaster in complex, almost calligraphic patterns, some tendrils reaching halfway to the ceiling, bolder now, more defined. My pulse drummed a frantic rhythm, my throat constricted. No visible breach in the paint, yet the lines blazed through. Forcing calm, I sought the window, admitting a sliver of moonlight. Along certain segments of the tracery, a faint, pulsing ruby glow became apparent. A wave of nausea rolled through my stomach. I hurried to my toolbox, retrieved a paint scraper. Surface phenomenon or something deeper? I pressed the blade against a small patch, scraping gently. Paint flaked away, revealing the primer beneath. The crimson markings seemed etched into this layer too. Applying more pressure, I scraped deeper, exposing the original paint layer from before my efforts began. The lines were there as well. I straightened, a cold dread solidifying within me. This defied logic. No stain should permeate multiple strata unless something within the wall itself was asserting its presence. Retreating, I pulled the door shut behind me, the unease too potent to remain. Each blink conjured the phantom image of those red patterns. A bottle of water from the kitchen became my companion as I paced the living room. A professional painter, a contractor, funds were scarce, and the explanation, the glowing, it sounded like delusion. Would they dismiss me or exploit my desperation, demanding exorbitant sums to demolish the wall? The subsequent days saw a grim escalation. Sleep offered no respite, only recurring nightmares of suffocating walls, of crimson ichor dripping onto my skin. I'd wake violently, drenched, limbs trembling, mouth parched. Headaches became a constant throbbing companion. Concentration at work dissolved. Evenings were spent staring at the sealed bedroom door or pacing endlessly. The lines, I knew without looking, were thickening, spreading. In the dark, the glow persisted. a dull, unwavering pulse that sent adrenaline surging through me, making my hands shake. The room itself felt heavy. The air within it seemed unnaturally still, dense. One evening, desperation spurred a new tactic: industrial-strength bleach. Window open for ventilation, hands sheathed in rubber gloves, I attacked a section of the wall. The caustic liquid streamed down the paint, yet the underlying scarlet remained untouched. A vigorous scrub with a cloth achieved nothing but a smear of diluted bleach. The fumes stung my eyes. I hurled the rag into the utility sink, wiping my brow, noticing the painful tension knotting my shoulders. A few nights later, a sound, faint, emanating from the bedroom, a rhythmic clicking, almost like tapping. Rising from the sofa, I moved with deliberate quiet to the door. Turning the knob with infinitesimal slowness, I opened it a mere inch. The interior pulsed with that familiar red luminescence. Stepping fully inside, I saw the lines themselves seem to throb in time with the sound. The clicking persisted for a few moments, then ceased. I stood frozen, heart pounding, palms slick, knees threatening to buckle. I flicked on the overhead light. The glow vanished. The lines remained. Tapping the wall with my knuckles produced only a solid, mundane thud. A ragged breath escaped me as I backed out, securing the door once more. The nightmares intensified, became more frequent. Waking was a jolt into physical misery. Trembling legs, dry mouth, pounding head. My appetite dwindled. Work became a blur. Home offered no solace, only the looming presence of that sealed door and the faint, intermittent sounds from beyond it. One final attempt. Sealant, the heaviest duty product I could find, paired with premium paint and new rollers. An entire Saturday devoted to the task. Meticulous application of the sealant, followed by the paint, covering every square inch, even the trim. Windows flung wide, I monitored the walls for hours. Nothing. A fragile seedling of hope took root. My body eased slightly. That evening, I even managed to watch a film, momentarily forgetting the crimson affliction. Around midnight, a final inspection before contemplating sleeping in the reclaimed space. Flashlight in hand, the house hushed around me. I pushed the door open, sweeping the beam across the walls. Empty. Then the light snagged on them. Outlines, faint at first, then resolving. The red lines had breached the sealant, the new paint, erupting across the surface in frenetic, chaotic patterns, brighter than ever. My chest seized. My breathing grew shallow, rapid. I placed the flashlight on the dresser, fumbled for the overhead switch. Light flooded the room, but the lines held fast, defiant, seemingly energized. Panic surged, rooting my feet to the floor. My gaze locked onto the crimson network. It seemed to shimmer, to shift before my very eyes. Compelled, I stepped forward, pressed my palm against one of the thicker veins near the corner. Warmth. A distinct, unnatural heat radiated from it. I snatched my hand back as if burned. A strangled gasp lodged in my throat. Stumbling backward, eyes fixed on the wall, I retrieved the flashlight, killed the lights, and fled the room. My hand trembled so violently I nearly dropped the light. I slammed the door, leaning against it, breath tearing through me, my shirt clinging damply to my back. The frantic thudding in my ears was deafening. Staying in the house felt untenable. I locked the bedroom door, then, absurdly, reinforced it with strips of packing tape around the frame. What else was there to do? The sofa became my permanent bed, though sleep remained fractured, haunted by the claustrophobic dream, wakened me gasping, aching. The subsequent day passed in a fog of exhaustion, limbs heavy, head pounding. Occasionally, driven by a morbid curiosity, I'd crack the door just to see. The lines were always there, glowing faintly in the gloom. Avoidance became my strategy. Long drives after work, fast food consumed in the car. Crossing my own threshold felt like wading into stagnant water, a palpable heaviness settling upon me. A mere glance towards the bedroom door sent tremors through my hands. Faint ticking sounds whispered through the walls at night. My appetite vanished. I forced down water, choked down food, battling nausea. Weeks bled into each other under this oppressive weight. Help was unavoidable. I contacted a general contractor, leaving a terse message about persistent, inexplicable staining, requesting an inspection. No mention of the glow, the pulsing, the warmth. The fear of disbelief was too strong. Seepage, I called it. Now, I wait for their return call. I recount this now from the living room sofa, my gaze perpetually straying towards the hallway. The bedroom door remains sealed, taped. My breath feels short, shallow. A restless energy thrums in my legs. Relaxation is impossible. Avoidance is unsustainable. Yet the thought of those crimson marks, their relentless resurgence through layer upon layer of defense, ties a cold knot deep in my gut. What transpires behind that door at this moment? Are the lines spreading further, claiming the ceiling, insinuating themselves beneath the floorboards? I recoil from the speculation. I wait, simply wait, for a professional intervention, for someone to dismantle that wall, excise whatever resides within. Sleep remains scarce. 3 or 4 hours snatched fitfully. My eyelids burn. My neck aches with tension. The house itself feels complicit, its very structure seeming to press inward. Sometimes, standing in the yard at night, I stare up at the bedroom window, catching faint, rhythmic flickers of red behind the curtains. My chest constricts. A profound weakness invades my arms. The swiftness of this descent into powerlessness within my own home is staggering. Telling this, putting it into words, is perhaps a futile attempt to regain some semblance of control, to ease the internal pressure. A soft sound drifts from the hallway wall. That steady tapping. It pauses, resumes. My heart accelerates. A fine sheen of sweat prickles my skin. My palms, slick, wipe against my jeans again and again. Trapped. I cannot enter that room, yet I cannot ignore its presence. I am suspended and waiting. There is no odor, no mold, no decay, no gas. Only this pervasive sense of weight, infiltrating my breath, settling in my core. A persistent, gnawing sensation. Questions swarm, unanswered. Will the contractors find a tangible cause, or will they merely offer confused stares? How long can this continue? All I know for certain is that each attempt to conceal, to eradicate, was met with renewed defiance. The marks returned, bolder, brighter, spreading across the plaster, radiating a dull, internal light in the darkness. They inhabit my dreams. I feel their pressure in my chest as I lie down. Safety is a forgotten concept in that room. Safety is a forgotten concept in this house. And that is the crux of the terror. I am taut with anxiety, restless, waiting for any resolution, hoping against hope that the walls do not finally succeed in closing in tonight. To be perfectly candid, the thought of stopping in Oak Haven hadn't even registered as a remote possibility. From the highway, half a mile off, it projected an aura of utter desolation. Windows blinded with plywood sheets like vacant eyes, roof lines slumped in weary surrender, the corroded skeletons of automobiles bleeding rust onto the tarmac's edge. My phone's map, a supposed oracle of the present, confirmed its vacancy. Population 0, and I'd believed it. Yet, the relentless drone of the engine and the hypnotic ribbon of asphalt had worn me down over countless hours. Weariness, a leaden weight behind my eyes, overruled the primal whisper of caution that insisted this was folly. The exit ramp appeared, an invitation into decay. Dusk painted the sky in the bruised purples and reds. Exhaustion fogged my better judgment. Just a brief pause, I rationalized. Stretch cramped limbs, perhaps find a secluded spot to wait out the encroaching night, and rejoin the world's flow at dawn. That, however, was not how the night unfolded. I navigated the main thoroughfare, its surface a mosaic of cracked asphalt yielding to defiant weeds. Structures on either side stood in states of advanced ruin, their windows either gaping voids or crudely patched. The corner gas station was a hollowed-out husk. Pumps ripped away, signage vanished, only a battered canopy remaining like a forgotten monument. An old welcome sign, half its letters surrendered to time and neglect, offered a greeting so bleak it bordered on comical. The setting sun slanted low, casting elongated, distorted shadows that crawled across the broken ground, imbuing the scene with a profound stillness, as if time itself had snagged and frayed here. My sedan came to rest before what might once have been a diner, its windows filmed with grime, one door hanging precariously from a single hinge. Easing out of the car, I stretched, joints protesting the long confinement. The air carried a stale scent, a blend of dry dust and aging wood. No human presence disturbed the quiet. A glance at my phone reaffirmed the area's abandoned status, though the signal flickered weakly. The nearest motel, it informed me, was an hour's drive further. Departure felt like the only sane option. I truly should have turned back then, but a peculiar curiosity, the kind sparked by profound decay, began to stir. One wonders about the exodus, the catalyst for such emptiness. Sometimes the urge to uncover a fragment of the past becomes irresistible. As the sun bled below the horizon, leaving the sky a smoldering ember, I began a slow circuit of the block. Crumbling storefronts leaned precariously, faded signs lay discarded like fallen tombstones, piles of fractured bricks marked former walls. Silence reigned, broken only by a thin breeze stirring clouds of dust. Testing one door, I found it yielded. Inside lay a cavernous space littered with overturned chairs and tables, perhaps a defunct municipal office or a small general store. Little remained to tell its story. Stepping back into the cooling air, a distinct chill traced its way down my spine. That was the moment the first anomaly registered. A faint, diffuse glow emanating from a window across the street. It was subtle, reminiscent of lamplight filtering from an adjacent room, yet its source remained hidden. My heart gave a sudden, hard thump. The map had been unequivocal. Drawn by an unnerving magnetism, I moved closer. The window pane, thick with the patina of neglect, resisted easy viewing. Shielding my eyes against the residual twilight, I pressed my face close to the cool, dirty glass. A shape shifted within. A silhouette, indistinct but undeniably human-proportioned, glided past the aperture and vanished into the interior gloom. Instinct took over. I rapped sharply on the door below. The wood rattled loosely in its frame, but remained shut. Waiting, the fine hairs on my neck prickled. Silence answered. I tried the handle, locked fast. Circling into the side alley, navigating drifts of unidentifiable debris, revealed no other entrance, only more boarded-up windows. It was then I noticed them. Other lights. Further down the street, pinpricks of luminescence began to appear in other houses. Not the bright, declarative lights of habitation, but muted, clandestine glows leaking from behind drawn curtains or filtering through gaps in plywood barriers. It felt as though an entire spectral neighborhood was stirring awake with the darkness, yet no sound, no movement outside accompanied this silent illumination. A profound disquiet settled over me. Every rational instinct screamed for retreat, back to the car, back to the known highway. But curiosity, now fully ignited, warred with fear. An explanation felt necessary. Squatters, perhaps? A hidden community existing off the digital grid? Possibilities flickered through my mind, yet none felt congruent with the unnerving stillness, the organized yet secretive nature of the lights. This felt different, more deliberate than makeshift lanterns against the cold. I pressed onward, deeper into the decaying heart of Oak Haven. Down the main road I walked, past houses shedding paint like sunburnt skin, their broken fences resembling jagged teeth. The sun had fully relinquished its hold. My flashlight beam cut a nervous swathe through the darkness, illuminating the treacherous ground. Periodically, I'd pause, scanning windows. Sometimes, a fleeting movement flickered at the edge of sight. Other times, only the persistent, faint glow stared back. My mouth grew dry. A clammy dampness slicked my palms. The feeling of being watched intensified, a palpable pressure between my shoulder blades. Approaching a modest, two-story dwelling, I detected a sound from within. Footsteps. Slow, measured, rhythmic. Pressing my ear flat against the weathered front door, I held my breath. The footsteps ceased abruptly. I stepped back, heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The urge to call out lodged itself in my throat, unspoken. Skirting around the side, careful to minimize noise, I found a window not entirely sealed by boards. Rising onto my toes, I peered through the narrow gap. A figure moved across the dimly lit room, visible only in profile. It appeared to be a man, clad in what looked like an old, heavy jacket, though details remained elusive in the gloom. He seemed to be pacing. Then he turned and melted into an adjoining room. Straining to see where he'd gone proved fruitless. The angle was wrong. I swallowed hard against the pounding in my ears. I decided to try knocking again, rapping my knuckles against the wooden siding. "Hello?" My voice sounded thin, absorbed by the oppressive silence. No response. A wave of near panic surged through me. "Leave," every nerve ending shrieked. Yet I hesitated, taking a step back, forcing a semblance of rational assessment. Perhaps they were wary of strangers, frightened even. But why hide so completely in a place the world believed dead? Taking a deep, steadying breath, I moved on, mind racing, trying desperately to catalog details to impose logic on the illogical. My legs, I realized, had developed a slight tremor. The crunch of dust and debris underfoot seemed unnervingly loud in the profound quiet, each step amplifying my jumpiness. Glances darted left and right, the sensation of unseen eyes tracking me becoming almost unbearable. Lights now glowed from nearly every house along the block, transforming the street into a gallery of watchful, luminous rectangles. A suffocating pressure built in my chest, as if I'd stumbled into a pocket reality, superficially familiar but fundamentally wrong. My stomach clenched. My throat felt raw. Who were these silent inhabitants? Were they even entirely human? Testing more doors yielded only locked entries or jammed frames. One, however, swung inward, revealing a hallway choked with overturned furniture and detritus. I stepped cautiously inside, flashlight beam dancing over peeling wallpaper and water-stained ceilings. The floor groaned beneath my weight. A faint, low hum emanated from deeper within the house, the distinct buzz of dormant electricity. Following the sound led me to what must have been a living room. In the corner, perched on a dusty stand, sat an old television set. Its screen emitted a faint, grayish light, displaying only crackling static. The hum originated from this relic, inexplicably powered on, yet receiving no signal. A prickle of gooseflesh traced patterns on my skin. Reaching out, I pressed the power button. The screen went dark. The hum ceased. I exhaled, unaware I'd been holding my breath. Who had left it on, and why? The feeling of intrusion intensified, sharp and unwelcome. Time to leave this place. As I turned, a distinct scraping sound drifted down from the second floor. Soft, yet deliberate. I froze, the flashlight trembling in my grasp. Is anyone up there? Silence was the only reply. One foot lifted towards the staircase, but an internal klaxon screamed a warning. My limbs felt heavy, leaden. My heart pounded with painful intensity. Forcing myself to turn, I retreated, pulling the door closed behind me, the click echoing unnaturally in the night. Back on the street, the lights in the surrounding houses seemed impossibly brighter, more focused, as if reacting to my presence. Each illuminated window felt like an eye, observing, judging. Wiping sweat from my brow, my hand came away damp. Enough. Back to the car. Departure now. But as I neared the derelict diner where I'd parked, I saw that it too now harbored light. Pressing my face again to the grimy glass door, I could see the interior chaos of broken booths. But now a single overhead light flickered erratically in the kitchen area beyond the counter. I could hear its low, insistent buzzing. Hesitantly, I pushed the door open further and stepped inside, boots crunching on scattered glass and plaster. The air hung thick with the ghosts of stale cooking oil and pervasive mold. Past the spectral counter, where a half-rotted menu lay curled and faded, its pictures of bygone meals rendered grotesque by decay, a short corridor led toward the kitchen. From its depths pulsed the erratic flicker. I advanced with the caution of a trespasser, breath held tight in my chest. The floor felt tacky underfoot. Reaching the threshold, I peered into the kitchen's cavernous gloom. An overhead fluorescent tube spat and sputtered, casting the empty, stainless steel surfaces in strobing relief. Relief washed over me. Nothing. until my gaze snagged on a dense shape huddled in the far corner near the basin, dark clothing, or perhaps just coated in the ubiquitous grime. The face remained obscured, but the faint rhythmic cadence of breathing reached me. My muscles locked. The flashlight became a potential bludgeon in my fist. "Hello?" The word emerged, thin and reedy. The figure exploded upwards, a blur of frantic motion towards the rear exit. I recoiled, heart slamming against my ribs. A violent shove, the back door protesting on rusted hinges, and they were gone into the alley's darkness. I stood rooted, air sawing in and out of my lungs. My first unambiguous sighting, tangible flesh and bone, not spectral haze. Yet, no word, no glance, just panicked flight. Leaving the diner, I scanned the rear alleyway. Empty. The solitude pressed in again, now laced with a sharper thread of fear. The possibility of real danger, of malice lurking in these shadows felt suddenly, chillingly plausible. Too many corners, too many blind spots. The street felt actively hostile now, the silent houses looming like judgmenta sentinels. Fatigue warred with adrenaline, my eyes straining in the darkness, constantly scanning windows, doorways, seeking any hint of movement. It was too much. The fragile thread of my resolve snapped. I turned and walked briskly towards my car, resisting the urge to break into a full run. My hand trembled as it reached for the door handle. That's when I saw them. Footprints etched clearly in the thick dust coating the ground near the driver's side door. Not mine. Smaller, the tread pattern suggesting sneakers. They circled the car partially, then simply vanished. Blood pounded in my ears. I yanked the door open, scrambled inside, and slammed the lock down. The engine caught with a reassuring roar. A frantic scan of the street revealed only the same unnerving emptiness, punctuated by those watchful, glowing windows. Shifting into reverse, I pulled away from the curb. Driving back down the main street felt like running a gauntlet. Every house I passed possessed its own faint internal light. Through grimy panes, I caught fleeting glimpses of shadow shapes, some gliding swiftly past, others standing unnervingly still. I kept the windows sealed, my foot heavy on the accelerator. Escape was the only imperative. My mind cycled endlessly through the same unanswerable questions. Who were they? Why the secrecy? Why the silence? As Oak Haven's last structures receded in my rearview mirror, the density of lights dwindling, a profound sense of relief washed over me, though my body still hummed with residual adrenaline. Back on the main highway, the world felt solid again. I let out a long, shuddering breath, acutely aware of the tension knotting my shoulders. My phone chimed, signaling stronger reception. Driven by compulsion, I searched again for information on the town, digging deeper this time. The narrative remained unchanged. Abandoned decades ago, economic collapse, potential environmental hazards. The official record simply stopped. No updates, no reports of resettlement, nothing to explain what I'd witnessed. An hour later, I checked into a nondescript roadside motel, my hands unsteady as I signed the register. The night clerk eyed me strangely, asking if I was all right. I offered only a curt nod. Sleep, in the sterile quiet of the room, proved impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, the silent tableau replayed, the figure bolting from the diner's gloom, silhouettes gliding behind dust-choked windows. An illogical, potent urge surfaced to turn the car around, to plunge back into that unsettling quietude. Fear, cold and absolute, held me fast. The night bled away into endless scrolling through obscure forums, forgotten news archives, digital whispers about the town. Everything confirmed its demise, yet the lights had burned. The footsteps had echoed. The figure in the diner was undeniably real. I knew I hadn't hallucinated it. And that is why it refuses to leave me. My mind rebels against the void, the dissonance. The skin prickles along my arms when I recall the way that place awakened after dusk, a constellation of muted glows inhabited by silent watchers. Were they survivors clinging to the wreckage? Squatters reclaiming the forgotten? Or something other? The suspicion lingers chillingly that they knew I was there, meticulously tracking my passage, waiting with unnerving patience for my departure. It's a burr under the skin, an obsession taking root. Sometimes, in the liminal space before sleep, I hear the faint, insistent hum of that television. Sometimes I bolt upright, drenched in sweat, convinced a silent observer stands just beyond my window. This cannot rest. Plans are already coalescing, a return trip sketched in the frantic margins of my thoughts. More gear this time, better illumination, perhaps a less conspicuous approach, a way inside, unseen. I need to confront them, understand the nature of this hidden existence sequestered within the corpse of a town. If a community thrives there in secret, the why is paramount. And if the reality defies mundane explanation, then witnessing it directly feels like the only path forward. Madness, perhaps, certainly perilous, but Oak Haven has sunk its hooks deep. It permeates my waking thoughts, haunts my sleep. The memory of those lights igniting, one after another, a silent, coordinated awakening. The deliberate, unhurried movements of the shadows. The figure in the diner, not fearful, but disturbed, annoyed at being discovered. That image, the crouched form, waiting, burns brightest. What happens when I encounter them again, when they realize I haven't simply passed through? The unknown is terrifying, but the not knowing, that's become unbearable. Returning is the only way to silence the questions, even if the answers prove stranger and more dangerous than I can currently conceive. And return I will.